She was just his secretary, but she awakened something he swore he had buried forever. On the beach, the blue bikini brought back memories that hurt more than desire. She looked too much like the woman he lost, or had he never really lost her? If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end, you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment saying where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. Aurora had always known that life wasn't made of dreams. At 33, after a divorce that left her with more relief than sadness and a series of jobs that taught her more about survival than hope, she had only two certainties: caring for her mother, who was slowly wasting away in a private hospital bed paid for with great sacrifice, and keeping herself invisible enough that no one would notice the exhaustion she carried in her brown eyes. The small apartment in Brooklyn Heights, New York, was her refuge. 2 bedrooms, a living room with an open-plan kitchen, decorated with simple furniture and a few plants she insisted on keeping alive, even when everything around her seemed to wither. It was there that she spent her nights studying reports, organizing schedules, and trying to understand how she had ended up here. The life of an executive assistant wasn't what she had dreamed of when she graduated with a business degree, but it paid the bills and gave her a sense of control she hadn't experienced in a long time. When she heard about the opening for Ethan Lancaster's personal assistant, Aurora hesitated. Everyone in New York knew the name, even her few knew exactly who the man behind it was, heir to one of the country's largest fortunes, built on technology, secret investments, and an empire of silence that stretched back decades. The Lancaster Group had its fingers in everything, from apps everyone used to investment funds that moved billions, and at the center of it all was a 38-year-old man whom no one saw, no one knew, no one understood. The interview was on the 40th floor of a building on Wall Street. Aurora arrived 15 minutes early, as she always did, wearing her one good suit, a black ensemble. She had bought on sale 2 years prior. The company's lobby was impressive, marble, glass, and a view of New York City that made the city seem too small to contain so many dreams and frustrations. The receptionist who greeted her was an elegant, middle-aged woman with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Scott, Mr. Lancaster will see you now." She was led down silent corridors where the only sounds were her low-heeled shoes against the polished floor and the distant murmur of conversations in closed rooms. The office door opened, and Aurora stepped into a space that seemed designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while a dark wooden desk dominated the center of the room. Behind it, with his back to her, stood a tall man observing the urban landscape. "Ms. Scott." The voice was deep, controlled without warmth. Ethan turned slowly, and Aurora felt a strange knot in her stomach. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was more like recognition, as if those dark grey eyes had been in her dreams long before she ever met him. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost cruel. Dark hair, slicked back, a strong jaw, a small scar on his forehead that only enhanced his magnetic presence, but it was his eyes that unsettled her. Grey like heated iron, they seemed to pierce through her, as if they could read every thought, every secret, every vulnerability she tried to hide. "Sit." It wasn't an invitation. It was a soft command, but a command nonetheless. Aurora obeyed, keeping her back straight and her hands clasped in her lap. She had learned that posture said more about a person than any words. Ethan didn't sit. Instead, he walked around the desk, picked up a file, and opened it in front of her. "Your resume is adequate. Experience in management, organization, discretion." He pronounced the last word as if it were the most important. "But tell me, Mrs. Scott, why should I hire you?" The question was simple, but the tone carried something more. A test, a challenge. Aurora took a deep breath. "Because I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Lancaster. And because I understand the difference between asking necessary questions and asking unnecessary ones." Something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, but an almost imperceptible easing of tension. "And what would that difference be? Necessary questions are about schedules, priorities, results. Unnecessary questions are about what's not my business." Aurora looked him straight in the eye. and I get the impression you value your privacy." This time he smiled. Or almost. It was more like the shadow of a smile, something that appeared and vanished so quickly, she almost doubted she'd seen it. "You're hired. Monday, 8 o'clock. Mrs. Sanders will give you all the necessary information." He returned to the window, clearly ending the conversation. Aurora stood up, but before she left, she heard his voice again. "Ms. Scott," she turned. "Welcome to my world. I hope you don't regret it." There was something in those words that made her shiver. It wasn't a threat, but a warning. As if he knew something she didn't. As if he could see a future she couldn't yet imagine. The first few days on the job were a silent revelation. Ethan Lancaster was no ordinary boss. He didn't yell, he didn't lose his temper, he didn't make absurd demands. It was worse than that. He was relentless in his silent perfection. Every document had to be impeccable, every meeting scheduled with military precision, every call filtered as if his life depended on it. Aurora quickly understood why she was the fourth assistant in 2 years. It wasn't the difficulty of the work that drove the others away. It was him. Ethan's presence was like a contained storm. You knew there was something powerful and dangerous there, but you never knew when or how it would break. He spoke little. His instructions came in short, direct sentences, leaving no room for interpretation. "Cancel the 3 o'clock meeting. I need the third quarter reports by tomorrow. Don't put through any calls from this list." The list was long and included names Aurora recognized from the newspapers. Politicians, business tycoons, socialites. People who, apparently, were no longer part of Ethan Lancaster's world. His office was a sanctuary of silence. Aurora rarely saw him eat, rarely saw him relax. He worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession, as if he were always running from something or chasing something no one else could see. It was at the end of the second week that Aurora began to notice the strange details. The calls he took personally that left him tense for hours, the documents he kept locked in, a safe only he knew how to open. The times she found him at the window, staring at the city with an expression she could only describe as haunted. There were pictures on his desk, few, discreet. One of him with an older man who was clearly his father, the same eyes, the same intimidating presence. Another of a seaside estate that looked like something out of a dream. And a third, which he kept face down, but which Aurora managed to glimpse once when he forgot to turn it over. It was a woman, blonde, smiling with blue eyes that, with blue, seemed to hold secrets. Aurora never asked who she was. She remembered her own rule about unnecessary questions, but curiosity was an itch she couldn't stop scratching. It was on a rainy Thursday that everything changed. Ethan arrived later than usual, soaked from the rain that had been lashing New York for 2 days. He seemed different, darker, more restless. He spent the entire morning on the phone, speaking in low tones in English and Spanish, with an urgency she had never seen before. Around noon he opened his office door. "Mrs. Scott, I need to speak with you." Aurora entered, and he closed the door behind her. For the first time since she had started working there, he seemed human, vulnerable perhaps, as if he were carrying a weight that had finally become too much for his shoulders. "I'm taking a trip." He went to the window, as he always did when he needed to think. "I need you to come with me." Aurora felt her heart speed up. "Where to, Mr. Lancaster?" "To a place that shouldn't exist, to deal with matters I should have dealt with a long time ago." He turned to her, and there was something different in his eyes. No longer the controlled coldness, but something closer to desperation. "It's a family property, an island. It's going to be complicated." "For how long?" 4 days, maybe 5. He paused, studying her face as if searching for something specific. "Can I trust you, Aurora?" It was the first time he had used her first name. The sound of his voice pronouncing those syllables did something strange in her chest. "Yes, sir. You can." "Then prepare the necessary documents. We leave on Monday." He returned to his desk, but before she left, he added, "And Aurora? Pack beach clothes. Where we're going, the rules are different." That weekend, Aurora packed her small suitcase with a strange feeling that she was preparing for much more than a business trip. She packed her suits, her blouses, her practical shoes. And at the last minute, almost as a private joke, she grabbed a bikini she had forgotten in the back of a drawer. It was light blue, simple, purchased years ago on a quick trip to the Hamptons with her sister. Her sister, Beatrice. The thought of her always came with a pang of pain. Dead. 5 years ago. In a car accident that never made much sense to Aurora. Beatrice was too careful to lose control of a vehicle on a road she knew by heart. But the investigation had been closed quickly, and Aurora had learned that some questions were better left unasked. On Monday, a driver picked her up at home before dawn. The car went straight to Teterboro Airport, where a private jet was waiting. Ethan was already there, wearing a white shirt and dark pants, with sunglasses that hid those unsettling eyes. "Ready?" he asked, and Aurora nodded, though she wasn't sure what she was agreeing to. The flight lasted 2 hours. Ethan spent most of the time in silence, looking out the window or shuffling through documents he kept in a leather briefcase. Aurora tried to read, but the tension in the air was almost palpable. There was something about this trip he wasn't telling her, something that made him restless in a way she had never seen. When they landed, Aurora understood why he had mentioned that the rules were different. It wasn't a normal airport. It was a private airstrip on an island that looked like it was straight from a postcard. Turquoise water surrounded a landmass covered in tropical vegetation, with a white colonial-style house on a hill that dominated the landscape. "Wildwind Isle," Ethan said, taking off his sunglasses. "Family property for 30 years. No one's been here since—" He stopped as if he'd said more than he intended. A middle-aged man was waiting for them with a jeep. He was tan, sun-weathered, with eyes that seemed to know all the secrets of the place. "Mr. Ethan," he said, in a voice that carried decades of respect. "Welcome back." "Miguel?" Ethan greeted the man with a nod. "This is Aurora, my assistant. Miguel takes care of the island." Miguel smiled at her, a genuine smile that contrasted with the tension emanating from Ethan. "Welcome, Miss Aurora. It's been a long time since we've had visitors here." The drive to the house was silent, except for the sound of the engine and the waves crashing against the rocks. Aurora looked out the window and felt something strange, as if this place were familiar, though she was sure she had never been here before. The house was larger than it appeared from a distance, 3 stories of colonial-style architecture with wooden verandas, and windows that opened to the sea. But there was something melancholic about it, as if it had been waiting too long for people who never returned. "Your rooms are on the 2nd floor, Ethan said, as Miguel carried the luggage. "Mine is on the 3rd. There are 2 staff members besides Miguel, his wife Dolores, who manages the house, and a local boy who helps with maintenance. There's no cell service here. The house phone only works for emergencies." Aurora nodded, trying to process the feeling of being completely cut off from the world. "And the work we came here to do?" Ethan stopped at the base of the stairs, his hands tightening on the wooden banister. "Tomorrow, today, rest. Explore the island if you like. Just don't—" He hesitated. "Just don't go into the rooms on the 3rd floor besides mine. Some doors are better left closed." With that, he went up the stairs, leaving Aurora alone in the hall. She stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading away and trying to understand why she felt there was more to this island than Ethan was willing to say. Her room was spacious and airy, with a queen-sized bed draped in a white mosquito net and a balcony that looked directly out over the sea. The breeze carried the scent of salt and something else, tropical flowers perhaps, or just the perfume of a freedom Aurora hadn't felt in years. She unpacked slowly, hanging her suits in the antique wooden wardrobe and placing her personal items on the vanity before the mirror. In the reflection, she saw a woman who looked different from the one who had boarded the jet a few hours earlier. Her hair was loose on her shoulders, her clothes less formal, an expression on her face she couldn't name. That first night, they dined in silence on the veranda. Dolores, a kind woman with gentle eyes, had prepared grilled fish, coconut rice, and a tropical fruit salad Aurora had never tasted before. Ethan ate little, drank some white wine, and spent most of the time staring at the sea as if expecting something to appear on the horizon. "The island is beautiful," Aurora said, trying to break the silence that was becoming uncomfortable. It was, Ethan replied without taking his eyes off the water. Before... He didn't finish the sentence. Aurora wanted to ask before what, but she remembered her own rules. Instead, she finished her food in silence and excused herself early. But when she got to her room, she couldn't sleep. There was something in the atmosphere of the house, something that kept her awake and alert. Around midnight, she stepped out onto her balcony. The moon was nearly full, illuminating the sea with a silvery glow that seemed magical. And that's when she saw a figure on the beach. It was Ethan, walking alone in the sand, hands in his pockets, head bowed as if carrying the weight of the world. Aurora watched him for a long time, wondering what ghosts this man was carrying and why he had brought her here to witness them. She didn't know yet that her own ghosts were closer than she imagined, nor that in the coming days she would uncover secrets that connected their lives in ways she could never have dreamed. What she did know was that something had changed the moment her feet touched the sand of that island, and that, somehow, she wouldn't be the same person when she left. Aurora woke to the sound of waves crashing against the rocks and the golden sunlight filtering through the cotton curtains. For a moment she forgot where she was. The room was so different from her cramped apartment in New York that it felt like it belonged to another life. Then the memory returned. The island, Ethan, the mysteries that hung over this place like an invisible mist. She put on a light blouse and shorts, tied her hair in a ponytail, and went down for breakfast. The kitchen was empty, but there was a note on the table. Coffee on the veranda. Ethan left early, back this afternoon. Dolores. Aurora found the table set with tropical fruits, homemade bread, white cheese and coffee that smelled better than anything she had ever tasted in the city. She ate slowly, watching the view she never tired of, the endless sea, the cloudless blue sky, the feeling of being at the end of the world. She decided to explore the island. Ethan had said she could, and curiosity was winning out over caution. She walked down to the beach via the stone path that led from the house to the pale sand. The sun wasn't too strong yet, and the sea breeze made her hair dance in the wind. The beach stretched for nearly a mile, flanked by coconut palms and tropical vegetation. Aurora walked slowly, letting the warm sand massage her bare feet. There were footprints in the sand, probably Ethan's from the night before. She followed the trail, imagining what went through his mind during those solitary walks. The footprints led to a rock formation at the end of the beach, where the sea created small tide pools. Aurora climbed carefully over the rocks, exploring the little lagoons filled with colorful fish and anemones. It was there that she found the first clue that this island held more secrets than she imagined. Between the rocks, half hidden by vegetation, was a small wooden pier. It was in good condition, but clearly hadn't been used in a long time. Aurora wondered what it was for. The house had a larger pier at the front, so why build another in such an isolated spot? She returned to the house, intrigued, but decided not to mention her discovery to Ethan. There was something in his demeanor that suggested he wouldn't be happy to know she was asking questions, even silent ones. She spent the afternoon reading on her balcony, trying to focus on a novel she had brought, but her thoughts kept returning to the man who had brought her here. Ethan was different from anyone she knew, not just because of his wealth or power, but because of something deeper. It was as if he carried an ancient sadness, a weight that no amount of money could alleviate. Around 5 in the afternoon, she heard the sound of an approaching engine. It was Miguel's Jeep, bringing Ethan back. Aurora peeked through the window and saw that he was carrying a briefcase, but his body language was that of someone who hadn't accomplished anything productive. His shoulders were tense, his face dark. Half an hour later, there was a knock on her door. Aurora. It was Ethan. Can we talk? She opened the door and was surprised by his proximity. In the office in New York, there was always a desk, a safe distance between them. Here, in the hallway of the house, he seemed larger, more intense. His scent, something masculine, woody, made her feel momentarily dizzy. Of course, do you want to come in or should we go downstairs? Here is fine. He stepped into the room but stayed near the door, as if he didn't trust himself to go any further. I want to apologize for today. It wasn't my intention to abandon you. You don't need to apologize. I know you have business to attend to." Ethan watched her for a moment, those grey eyes seeming to search for something in her face. "You're different here." "How so?" "In New York, you're all efficiency and professionalism. Here," he paused, running a hand through his hair, "here you seem more real." Aurora felt her face grow warm. "I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not. It's an observation." He took a step closer and she could see small details she had never noticed before. The texture of his skin, the way his lips curved slightly when he was thinking, the small scar on his forehead that she wanted to ask about. "Ethan," she started to say something, but he interrupted her. "You were married." It wasn't a question. "Yes. For 3 years. It ended 2 years ago." "What happened?" The question was too intimate for their professional relationship, but something about the island's atmosphere made the normal rules seem irrelevant. "We became strangers, 2 people living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, but completely separate. In the end, it was a relief for both of us." Ethan nodded, as if he understood perfectly. "And you never wanted to try again? Get remarried?" Aurora laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "With whom?" "I work 16 hours a day, take care of my mother in my spare time, and barely have any time for myself. It's not exactly an attractive profile for a relationship." "You underestimate yourself." The words hung in the air between them. Aurora felt a shift in the room's dynamic, a tension different from what she was used to. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged. "And you?" she asked, before she could stop herself. "Have you ever been married?" Ethan's face closed off instantly. The cold, controlled mask slipped back into place, and Aurora knew she had crossed an invisible line. "No," he said simply. "We never got to that point." "We?" He was already turning to leave. "We'll have dinner at 8. Dolores has prepared something special." And with that he was gone, leaving Aurora alone with more questions than answers. During dinner, Ethan made a visible effort to keep the conversation on safe topics: the weather, the food, neutral stories about the island. Aurora learned that the property had been bought by his grandfather in the 1990s, when he was a young businessman seeking a refuge from the prying eyes of New York. The family used to spend holidays here, especially during the summer. "My father brought my mother here when they were dating," Ethan recounted, sipping a wine that looked too expensive for Aurora to even imagine the price. She said this is where she truly fell in love with him, something about the magic of the place. "And now? Do you still come here as a family?" His expression darkened. "My mother died when I was 15. My father, he doesn't like this place anymore. Too many memories." Aurora felt a pang of compassion. "I'm sorry. It must have been difficult to lose your mother so young." "It was. But you understand that, don't you? I heard you lost your sister." The comment caught her off guard. She didn't remember mentioning Beatrice during the interview, or at any time since she started working for him. "How did you know that?" Ethan hesitated, realizing he had revealed more than he intended. "It's in your personnel file, standard background check." It was a lie. Aurora was sure of it. Background checks didn't investigate family tragedies, especially not intimate details like a sister's death. But she didn't confront the lie. Instead, she filed the information away as another piece of the puzzle that was Ethan Lancaster. "Yes, I lost my sister 5 years ago," she said carefully. "A car accident." "Were you close?" "Very. She was 2 years younger, but she was always the more adventurous one. Beatrice lived life as if every day were a new discovery." Aurora smiled sadly. "She would have loved this place." Something flickered across Ethan's face when she said the name Beatrice. It was too quick for Aurora to be sure, but it almost looked like recognition. "Beatrice is a beautiful name," he said, but his voice sounded strange, forced. The rest of dinner passed in relative silence. Aurora was increasingly convinced that there were layers of secrets on this island that she hadn't even begun to scratch the surface of, and Ethan was hiding something related to her specifically. The way he had reacted to her sister's name, how he knew about her death, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. That night, Aurora stayed awake late, watching the sea from her window and trying to connect dots that might not even exist. But there was a persistent feeling, a mental itch she couldn't relieve, the sense that her presence on this island was no coincidence. Around 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hall. They were slow, careful, as if someone were trying not to make a sound. Aurora crept to her door and heard Ethan going up to the 3rd floor. Then the sound of a door opening and closing. Curious, she opened her door just a crack and peeked into the hallway. It was empty, but a faint light was coming from the floor above. Aurora knew she should go back to bed, respect his privacy, but something stronger than prudence propelled her out of the room. Barefoot, she silently climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway was similar to the 2nd, but there was something different in the air, a soft scent, like a woman's perfume that had lingered even after years. The light was coming from a room at the end of the hall, the door ajar. Aurora approached cautiously, knowing she was violating every rule of privacy and professionalism she had set for herself. But curiosity was stronger than reason. Through the crack in the door, she saw Ethan sitting in an armchair in front of a dresser, holding what looked like a photograph. But it wasn't that which made her heart race. It was the room itself. It was clearly a woman's bedroom. A 4-poster bed, delicate curtains, furniture painted white. But it was too tidy, too clean, like a museum preserving a moment in time. And on the dresser in front of Ethan, there were dozens of photographs. Photographs of a blonde woman, the same woman from the picture he kept face down on his desk in the office. Aurora was about to turn back to her room when Ethan spoke. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but laden with a pain she had never heard before. "Why did you have to leave? Why couldn't you stay and fight for us?" The words were directed at the photograph, but they hit Aurora like a punch. There was so much suffering in that voice that she felt tears prick her eyes. Without thinking of the consequences, she took a step back, but her foot found a floorboard that creaked. Ethan turned instantly, his eyes meeting hers through the ajar door. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he placed the photograph back on the dresser and came to the door. "You shouldn't be here, Aurora." His voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his muscles, the way his fists were clenched. It wasn't anger exactly, it was something more complex. Vulnerability exposed when he had thought he was safe. "I'm sorry, I heard a noise and I thought—" She couldn't finish the lie. "I thought I told you not to go into the other rooms." "You did, and you were right. I shouldn't have come up." They stood there for a moment that felt like an eternity. Aurora could feel the warmth radiating from his body, see the way his breathing was slightly accelerated. There was something in the air between them, an electric tension that made her skin tingle. Who is she? The question slipped out before Aurora could stop it. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, there was resignation in them. Someone I loved, someone I lost. How? In the worst way possible. He moved away from the door, going to the room's window. She chose to leave instead of stay. She chose the sea instead of me. Aurora felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in the way he said that, something that suggested the woman hadn't simply left. She died. Yes, but before that, she abandoned me in every way that mattered. Ethan turned to Aurora, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made her take a step back. "And you know what's worse? You look like her, frighteningly so." The words fell between them like a bomb. Suddenly, so many things started to make sense. The way he had looked at her during the interview, why he had hired her when other assistants didn't last, the constant tension she felt emanating from him. "Is that why you brought me here?" Aurora asked, her voice almost a whisper. "No," Ethan said, but it didn't sound convincing. "Maybe. I don't know anymore." He approached her again, and this time, Aurora didn't retreat. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew her in even though she knew she should run. When he raised his hand and gently touched her face, she didn't pull away. "You're not her," he murmured. as if trying to convince himself. "You're different, stronger, more real." Aurora felt her heart race dangerously. His hand was warm against her skin, and she could see tiny gold flecks in his grey eyes. "Ethan, I know this is crazy. I know I'm confusing things, but when I look at you—" He stopped, taking a deep breath. "When I look at you, I feel like I might get a second chance to make things right." Aurora knew she should say something sensible, something professional. She should remind them both that they were employer and employee, that this was completely inappropriate. But when Ethan leaned slightly toward her, when she saw the raw vulnerability in his eyes, all sensible words fled her mind. Instead, she did something that surprised herself. She raised her hand and touched the small scar on his forehead. How did this happen? The question was intimate, but it felt natural in the context of that emotionally charged moment. Ethan closed his eyes at her touch. "Motorcycle accident as a teenager. I was running from ghosts that only existed in my head." He opened his eyes and stared at her intensely. "It seems I'm still running from them." Aurora felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous and irresistible. Maybe it's time to stop running. For a moment, she thought he was going to kiss her. The tension between them was almost physical, like a rope stretched to its breaking point. But then Ethan took a step back, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "You should go back to your room, Aurora. This is—" He searched for the right words. "This is too complicated." Aurora nodded, knowing he was right, but feeling a sharp disappointment that surprised her. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Aurora?" She looked back. "Tomorrow we'll finish what we came here to do. And then we go back to New York and pretend this never happened." Aurora nodded again, but as she descended the stairs to her room, she knew it would be impossible to pretend nothing had changed. A line had been crossed that night. A barrier had been broken. And she had a feeling that regardless of what Ethan thought he had come to do on this island, the true purpose of the trip was only just beginning to reveal itself. Aurora woke with the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, but the room felt different, as if she was seeing everything through a new lens. The memories of the previous night came in waves. The preserved room, the photograph, Ethan's touch on her face, his promise that they would pretend nothing had happened. But something had happened, and Aurora knew it wouldn't be easy to pretend otherwise. She dressed carefully, choosing a white blouse and a light skirt, as if the clothes could help her maintain the composure she felt slipping through her fingers. She went down to breakfast expecting to find Ethan with his cold mask back in place, ready to re-establish the professional boundaries between them. Instead, she found a note from Dolores. "Aurora, dear, Mr. Ethan left very early. Said he'd be back before lunch. I've made fresh coffee in the kitchen. If you need anything, I'll be in the garden. D." Aurora felt a mix of relief and disappointment. Part of her wanted to face the morning after tension, to resolve whatever was happening between them. Another part was grateful for the time to process everything alone. She had coffee on the veranda, watching the waves crash against the rocks and trying to organize her thoughts. There were too many unanswered questions. Why had Ethan really brought her here? Who was the woman in the photographs? And why did Aurora feel a strange connection to this place, as if she had been here before? She decided to use the free morning to explore the island further. This time she would be more systematic, more observant. If there were secrets hidden here, she would find them. She started with the house itself. During her comings and goings over the past few days, she had noticed a few rooms on the ground floor that remained closed. Now, with Ethan absent, she could explore them without seeming invasive. The first room appeared to be an office or library. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and there was a mahogany desk in the center with several papers scattered on it. Aurora examined the documents carefully. They were old contracts related to the purchase of the island, business correspondence, nothing too revealing. But it was in a side drawer of the desk that she found something interesting. An envelope, yellowed with age, with no return address, containing a handwritten letter. The handwriting was feminine, delicate, and it was dated 7 years ago. "My dearest Ethan," the letter began. "I know you won't understand my decision, but I have to leave. I can't live in this world of appearances and secrets anymore. You are a good man, but this place, this life, it's killing me inside. By the time you read this, I'll be far away, trying to find who I really am without you, without your family, without the expectations that suffocate me. Please don't look for me. Let me go in peace. With love and regret, B." Aurora's heart pounded. B. Bianca. This was the farewell letter from the woman Ethan had loved. But something about it didn't sound like a suicide note, as Ethan had suggested the night before. It sounded like someone who was running away, not from a man, but from a situation. Aurora carefully placed the letter back in the envelope, but discreetly photographed it with her phone before realizing there was no signal. The information would have to remain in her memory for now. She continued exploring. The next room seemed to be a game or entertainment room, a pool table, a well-stocked bar, comfortable sofas. But it was on the walls that Aurora found something that made her blood run cold. There were framed photographs hanging decoratively, groups of people smiling, clearly at parties or social gatherings, and in one of them, in the right-hand corner, was a woman Aurora recognized instantly. Beatrice, her dead sister. Aurora snatched the frame from the wall with trembling hands. The photo clearly showed her sister next to a tall, dark-haired man she didn't recognize, but who was definitely not Ethan. They were smiling, they looked intimate, and in the background, Aurora could see the sea, probably this very beach. How had her sister been on this island? When? Why? Aurora sat down heavily in an armchair, still clutching the photograph. Her mind worked quickly, trying to connect the dots. Beatrice had never mentioned knowing Ethan Lancaster or visiting a private island, but here was proof that she had been in this very place where Aurora now found herself. And Ethan knew. He had mentioned knowing about Beatrice's death, had reacted strangely when she said her sister's name. He knew about the connection, and he hadn't said a word. The sound of footsteps in the hall made her quickly tuck the photograph into her bag. It was Dolores carrying a broom and cleaning supplies. "Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I didn't know you were in here." "Don't worry, Dolores. I was just exploring. Ethan said I could." The older woman smiled, but Aurora noticed something hesitant in her expression. Of course. This island has a lot of history. Sometimes it's best not to stir up the past, you know." "What do you mean?" Dolores fidgeted nervously, arranging objects that were already in place. "Oh, it's nothing. It's just, this place has seen a lot of sadness. A lot of people come here trying to forget things and end up remembering even more. Did you know the woman Ethan loved, Bianca?" Dolores's face shut down immediately. "That's not my business, dear, and it shouldn't be yours either." The shift in the woman's attitude was so abrupt that Aurora knew she had hit a nerve. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be intrusive. It's all right, just be careful what questions you ask around here. Some answers are more dangerous than ignorance." With that, Dolores left the room, leaving Aurora alone with even more questions. Everything on this island seemed to conspire to keep secrets, but Aurora was determined to find out the truth about her sister's connection to this place. She decided to explore the outside of the property. There were elaborate gardens behind the house with paths leading to different parts of the island. Aurora chose a path that seemed to lead to the opposite side of the main beach. The walk took about 20 minutes through dense tropical vegetation. The sound of the sea grew louder as she neared the coast. When she finally emerged from the trees, she found herself in a small, sheltered cove with white sand and crystal-clear water. And there, half hidden among palm trees, was a small bungalow. The building was simple, but well-maintained. It looked inhabited, or at least recently used. Aurora approached cautiously. The windows were open, white curtains billowing in the sea breeze. She peeked through one of the windows and saw a cozy interior. A small living room with simple sofas, a kitchenette, and a door leading to what looked like a bedroom. There were clothes hanging on a makeshift clothesline, books scattered on a low table, clear signs that someone was living there. "Can I help you?" A man's voice from behind her made her spin around, startled. He was a man of about 40, classically handsome, with brown hair streaked with grey and friendly blue eyes. He was wearing swim trunks and a simple t-shirt, as if he had just come from the beach. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know anyone was—" Aurora felt like an intruder. The man smiled, a genuine smile that immediately put her at ease. "Don't worry, this is the guest house. You must be Aurora." "Yes, and you are—" "Raphael Cole. I'm an old friend of the Lancaster family." He extended his hand, and his grip was firm and warm. "Ethan told me he was coming with an assistant. A pleasure to meet you." Aurora studied the man as they shook hands. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. "I didn't know there were other guests on the island. I've been coming here for years. Ethan and I have been friends since college. This place is kind of my refuge, too." Raphael gestured toward the bungalow. "Would you like to come in? I can offer you something to drink." Aurora hesitated for a moment. Ethan had said there were only the staff on the island. He hadn't mentioned Raphael. But the man seemed genuine, friendly. "Why not?" she decided. The inside of the bungalow was cozy and lived in. Raphael made fresh lemonade while they talked. He was easy to talk to. Unlike Ethan, who always seemed to carry the weight of the world, Raphael had a natural lightness that made her feel at ease. "So you work for Ethan," he said, sitting in an armchair across from her. "That must be interesting." "That's one word for it." Aurora smiled. "He's a complex man." "That's putting it mildly," Raphael laughed. "Ethan is stubborn, obsessive, and has an impressive ability to complicate simple situations. But he's a good man. He just carries a lot of ghosts." "Did you know Bianca?" Raphael's expression changed subtly. "I did. She was special, very beautiful, intelligent, but fragile. This place wasn't good for her." "What happened?" "Exactly. Ethan doesn't talk about it." Raphael was silent for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. "Bianca had issues, depression, anxiety. Ethan tried to help, but sometimes love isn't enough. She disappeared one morning, left a note saying she was leaving, but—" He paused. "Her body was found in the sea 3 days later." Aurora felt a chill. "Ethan thinks it was suicide." "Ethan blames himself. He thinks he should have seen the signs, done something different. That's why he stopped coming here, why he closed off that room like a shrine." Raphael watched her carefully. "And why he was so disturbed when he saw you." "What do you mean?" "Aurora, you're almost identical to Bianca. The resemblance is unsettling. When Ethan told me he'd hired a new assistant, I thought it was a coincidence. But when I saw him looking at your photos in the personnel file, I knew it wasn't." Aurora felt her heart race. "He hired me because of the resemblance." "I don't know. Maybe even he doesn't know. Ethan has always had a complicated relationship with the past." Raphael leaned forward. "But you need to be careful. He might be confusing you with her, and that's dangerous for both of you." Aurora processed the information. "Raphael, can I ask you something? Did you know a woman named Beatrice? Beatrice Scott?" The change in Raphael's expression was instant and dramatic. The smile vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like guilt. "How do you know that name?" His voice was tense. "She was my sister. She died 5 years ago." Raphael turned pale. He stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "My God, you're Beatrice's sister. You knew her." "I did. She—" Raphael ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "Aurora, there are things you don't know, things about your sister, about why she was here. She was here, when, why?" Raphael turned to her, and there was something close to desperation in his eyes. "Your sister didn't die in an accident, Aurora, and you being here now with Ethan. This is no coincidence." The world seemed to stop around Aurora. "What do you mean?" "Beatrice was working for me. I hired her to watch Bianca, to find out what was going on between her and Ethan. There were rumors that Bianca was planning to leave Ethan, and that would have been problematic for the family business." Aurora felt nausea rise in her throat. "You hired my sister to spy? It was just observation, nothing dangerous. Beatrice was smart, discreet. She befriended Bianca. They gained each other's trust. Raphael came back toward her, his hands outstretched in a plea. But something went wrong. Beatrice found out something she shouldn't have, and when she tried to back away, when she said she wanted out— "What happened?" Aurora's voice was just a whisper. "I don't know exactly. I know she left the island on a Friday, said she was going to tell someone everything. On Monday, I heard she had died on a highway in New York." Aurora stood up slowly, her legs feeling shaky. "Are you saying my sister was murdered?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe it really was an accident. But Aurora—" Raphael held her by the shoulders gently. "You need to get out of here now. If Ethan finds out who you really are, if he learns about the connection to Beatrice, he already knows." Aurora realized with horror. "That's why he brought me here. He knows exactly who I am." The sound of an approaching engine interrupted them. Raphael rushed to the window. "It's Miguel's Jeep. Ethan's coming back." Aurora felt a surge of panic. Her mind was reeling with all the revelations. Her sister had been on this island, had been hired to spy on the woman Ethan loved, had discovered something dangerous, and died shortly after. And now she was here in the same place with the same man. "Aurora, listen," Raphael said urgently. "Don't let Ethan know we talked. Don't let him know you found out about Beatrice. Not yet, at least. I need time to figure out exactly what's going on. How can I trust you? You hired my sister to spy." "Because," Raphael said, holding her face gently, "your sister was a special person, and I fell in love with her. When she died, I swore I would find out the truth. You being here, maybe this is the chance I needed." Aurora stared at him, trying to decide whether to trust him. But the sound of the Jeep was getting closer, and she had to make a decision. "I'll go back to the house," she said. "But Raphael, if you're lying to me, if there's something else you're not telling me, there's a lot more I'm not telling you," he admitted. "But not now. Tonight, when Ethan is asleep, come back here. I have things to show you. Things your sister left behind." Aurora nodded and quickly left the bungalow, her heart pounding like a drum. The walk back through the path felt eternal, her mind spinning with all the terrifying possibilities Raphael's revelations had opened up. When she reached the main house, she found Ethan on the veranda, still wearing the clothes he had left in that morning. He saw her coming and smiled, a smile that now seemed laden with hidden meanings. "Did you enjoy your morning?" he asked, as if it were the most natural question in the world. "Yes, I explored the island a bit. It's beautiful." Aurora struggled to keep her voice normal. "How was your outing?" "Productive." He studied her carefully. "Is everything all right? You seem agitated." "Just a little too much sun, maybe." Ethan nodded, but she could tell he wasn't convinced. "Why don't you rest a bit? Dolores is making something special for lunch." Aurora nodded and headed inside, but she could feel Ethan's eyes on her back. When she reached her room and looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who looked as if she had aged years in one morning. Her eyes were haunted, her face pale. She had come to this island thinking she was accompanying her boss on a business trip. Now she knew she was at the center of a web of lies, manipulation, and possibly murder. Her sister had been in this very room, had walked these same paths, had discovered secrets that may have cost her her life. And Ethan Lancaster, the man who had begun to awaken feelings she thought she had buried forever, was at the center of Chayatul. Aurora sat on the bed, still holding the photograph of Beatrice she had found. Tonight she would return to Raphael's bungalow. Tonight she would find out what other truths her sister had left behind. And tonight, perhaps, she would finally understand why fate had brought her to this island in the first place. Lunch was a silent torture. Aurora forced herself to eat the grilled fish Dolores had prepared, but every bite seemed to get stuck in her throat. Ethan sat across from her at the veranda table, making casual conversation about the weather and the food, but she could feel him watching her constantly. His grey eyes seemed to be searching for something, as if he could sense that something fundamental had changed. "You're very quiet today," he commented, delicately cutting a piece of fish. "Are you sure you're feeling well?" "Just a little tired, The island sun is stronger than I'm used to. Aurora forced a smile. In New York, I spend most of my time in closed offices. True. It must be quite a change to be here. Ethan paused, setting his fork down. Aurora, may I ask you a personal question? Her heart sped. Of course. Have you ever had the feeling that fate was conspiring to put you in a specific place, as if forces beyond your control were directing your life? The question was so close to Aurora's own thoughts that she almost choked. Why do you ask? Just curious. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Sometimes I feel there are patterns in life that we can only see in hindsight. People who show up at the right time, or maybe the wrong time. Connections that seem impossible, but make perfect sense. Aurora felt as if he was speaking in code, as if he knew exactly what she had discovered that morning. You believe in fate, then? I believe some things are inevitable, that certain people are meant to meet, regardless of the circumstances. His eyes locked with hers with an intensity that made her shiver. And you, Aurora? Do you believe the two of us are here by chance? The question hung in the air between them like a veiled confession. Aurora knew she should respond professionally, keep the lines clear between employee and employer. But there was something in Ethan's tone, something in the way he said her name that made those lines dissolve. I don't know, she answered honestly, but I have a feeling there's much more to this trip than you've told me. Ethan smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. There's always more than we tell, isn't there? We all keep secrets. The question is, what do we do when those secrets come to light? Aurora felt a chill run down her spine. He knew. Somehow Ethan knew she had discovered something. Ethan, she began, but he held up a hand. Not now. This afternoon I need to take care of a few things. Documents, calls. Perhaps tonight. We can have a more honest conversation. He stood up from the table. Enjoy the day, Aurora. Explore the island. But watch your step. Sometimes the ground here is more treacherous than it looks. With that he left, leaving Aurora alone with her turbulent thoughts and the growing certainty that she was walking on emotional quicksand. The afternoon passed slowly. Aurora tried to read on her balcony, but she couldn't concentrate. She tried to organize the documents she had brought, but the words on the pages seemed to blur. All she could think about was her conversation with Raphael, the revelations about Beatrice, the way Ethan looked at her as if he could see into her soul. Around 5 o'clock, she decided she couldn't wait until tonight for answers. She went down to try to find Raphael again, but when she reached the bungalow, she found it empty. There was a note on the table. Aurora, went to get some important documents. Back at 8. Meet me on the beach behind the bungalow. R. Frustrated, Aurora returned to the main house. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that were too beautiful for the turmoil in her mind. She found Dolores in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Dolores, she said carefully, may I ask you something? The older woman stopped chopping vegetables and looked at her cautiously. Of course, dear. Were you here when Bianca lived on the island? Dolores's face immediately closed off. I've already told you. I don't like to talk about the past. I understand, but do you remember a woman named Beatrice? Brown hair, about my height. She would have come here about 5 years ago. Dolores dropped the knife on the cutting board. Why are you asking these questions? Because Beatrice was my sister, and I found out today that she was here before she died. Dolores was silent for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly. Then, as if making a difficult decision, she dried her hands on her apron and gestured for Aurora to follow her. They went out to a small garden behind the house, away from the windows and doors. Dolores looked around nervously before speaking. Your sister was a sweet girl, she said in a low voice. Very polite, always helped in the kitchen when she was here. But there was something sad about her, as if she were carrying a weight too heavy for her shoulders. Did she come here often? A few times over a few months, always with that man, Raphael. They had a relationship, but it was complicated. He was older. had responsibilities, and she was involved in things she didn't fully understand. Aurora felt her heart clench. What kind of things? Miss Bianca was very unhappy at that time. She wanted to leave Mr. Ethan, but there were pressures. Powerful families, important business deals. Your sister and Raphael thought they were helping, but they were wading into very deep water. What happened exactly? Dolores glanced around once more, then leaned closer. The last time your sister was here, she was different. Scared. She told Raphael she had discovered something terrible, something about the Lancaster family that would change everything. But before she could say what it was, she had to leave in a hurry. Said someone had found out she was investigating. Aurora felt sick. And then? Then nothing. Raphael was devastated when he heard she had died. He blamed himself, said he should never have involved her. And Mr. Ethan? Dolores hesitated. What about Ethan? He changed after Miss Bianca died, became colder, more distant. But when he heard about your sister's accident, he was strange. He asked a lot of questions, wanted to know details that didn't make sense, as if he were trying to connect dots no one else saw. Aurora processed the information. Dolores, do you think my sister's death and Bianca's death are connected? The older woman turned pale. I don't know, dear, but I know this island has many ghosts, and you— She touched Aurora's face gently. You look so much like both of them. Like Miss Bianca and like your sister. It's as if the past is coming back to haunt us. The sound of footsteps on the garden stones interrupted them. It was Ethan, wearing dark pants and a white shirt that made his eyes look even more intense in the golden sunset light. Dolores, thank you for dinner. It smells delicious. His voice was courteous, but Aurora sensed the tension beneath the politeness. Aurora, could you join me on the beach? There are a few things we need to discuss. Aurora felt her stomach churn. Of course. They walked in silence to the main beach, where the waves gently lapped at the sand. The sun was almost touching the horizon, creating a spectacle of colors that would have been romantic under any other circumstances. But the tension in the air between them turned the beauty into something almost ominous. Ethan stopped when they reached the water's edge, his hands in his pockets, staring out at the sea as if he could find answers in the waves. You spoke with Raphael today, he said. It wasn't a question. Aurora felt her blood run cold. How do you know? Because I've known Raphael for 15 years, and I know you well enough to tell when you're hiding something. He turned to face her. What did he tell you? Aurora knew she had reached the moment of truth. She could keep lying, pretending she knew nothing, or she could confront Ethan directly. She chose honesty. He told me about Beatrice, my sister. Something in Ethan's face changed. The mask of control slipped for a moment, revealing something that looked almost like relief. So you know, he said simply. I know she was here. I know Raphael hired her to spy on Bianca. I know she discovered something before she died. Aurora took a step toward him. What I don't know is why you brought me here, why you didn't tell me you knew my sister. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Aurora was beginning to recognize as a sign he was wrestling with something internally. Because, he said finally, I didn't know how to explain that I fell for you the moment I saw you, even knowing who you were. I didn't know how to tell you that I brought you here because I need the truth, but also because I couldn't stay away from you. The words hit Aurora like a wave. You fell for me? How could I not? You're everything Bianca was, but also everything she wasn't. You're strong where she was fragile. You're real where she was artificial. And when I found out you were Beatrice's sister, he moved closer, his eyes fixed on hers. I knew the universe was giving me a second chance to make things right. Ethan, Aurora felt as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff. Did my sister die because she found out something about you, about your family? Not about me, about my father. Ethan's voice grew hard. Beatrice discovered that he had ordered Bianca to be pressured not to leave me, that he had threatened her family, used his influence to force her to stay with me. Bianca was being blackmailed into maintaining our relationship. Aurora felt as if the ground were disappearing beneath her feet. And that's why she killed herself? No. Ethan moved closer, his hands reaching out as if he wanted to touch her, but didn't dare. Bianca didn't kill herself, Aurora. She was murdered, and your sister found that out. The world spun around Aurora. How do you know that? Because that's why I brought you here. Not just because I fell for you, but because you're the only person who can help me prove what really happened. Ethan finally touched her, his hands gently holding her arms. Your sister hid evidence before she died. Evidence that proves Bianca was killed on my father's orders, and that Beatrice was murdered to silence her. Aurora pulled her arms away, stepping back from him. Are you telling me your own father killed 2 women? My father is a powerful man who believes money can solve any problem, and eliminate any obstacle. Bianca was going to put the family in an embarrassing situation. Beatrice had information that could destroy our reputation. Ethan's voice was laden with a pain that seemed physical. And I spent 5 years thinking it was my fault, that if I had been a better man, Bianca would still be alive. Aurora tried to process it all. Why are you telling me this now? Because Raphael found where Beatrice hid the evidence. And because... Ethan hesitated, his eyes intensifying. Because I've truly fallen in love with you, Aurora. Not for your resemblance to Bianca, not because of the connection to your sister, for you, and I can't have you in my life carrying these lies. Aurora felt tears prick her eyes. The last hour had been an emotional roller coaster that left her exhausted. How can I trust you? How do I know you're not lying now? Because, Ethan said, moving closer again, I'm going to give you what your sister died trying to get, the whole truth. Tonight, Raphael will show us what Beatrice discovered. And then, you'll decide if you can forgive me for waiting so long to be honest. Aurora stared at him, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes. There were so many layers of emotion there. Pain, guilt, hope, and something that looked dangerously like love. And what if the truth is worse than I imagine? She asked. Then we'll face it together, if you'll let me. Before Aurora could answer, Ethan leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if asking for permission. But when she didn't pull away, when she in fact leaned slightly toward him, the kiss deepened. It was everything Aurora had imagined and more. There was passion, yes, but there was also something deeper. Desperation, maybe. The kiss of a man who had lost too much and was terrified of losing more. When they broke apart, they were both breathing heavily. Aurora could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. Aurora, Ethan murmured, his forehead resting against hers. No, she said, pulling back slightly. Not now. First, I want to see what my sister discovered. First, I want the whole truth. Then we'll see what's real between us. Ethan nodded, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. Tonight, then, on the beach behind Raphael's bungalow, at 8. I'll be there. They walked back to the house in silence, but it was a silence charged with possibilities. Aurora felt as if she was standing on the brink of a fundamental change in her life. In a few hours, she would finally know why her sister had died. And maybe, just maybe, she would find out if what she felt for Ethan Lancaster was real enough to survive the truth. As she got ready for dinner, Aurora looked at herself in her bedroom mirror. The woman staring back at her seemed different from the one who had arrived on the island just a few days ago. There was an intensity in her eyes that wasn't there before, a determination that came from finally being close to the answers she had sought for 5 years. Tonight, one way or another, she would know what really happened to Beatrice. And tonight, she would decide if she could build a future with a man whose past was so intertwined with her family's tragedy. Dinner passed in a haze of polite conversation and underlying tension. Ethan was courteous, even charming, but Aurora could feel the nervous energy emanating from him. It was clear that tonight would be decisive for them both. When it was finally time to go to the beach to meet Raphael, Aurora was trembling, not from cold, but from anticipation and fear. In a few hours, her life could change forever. The only question was, for better or for worse. Aurora arrived at the beach behind the bungalow at exactly 8 o'clock. The moon was nearly full, casting a silver light on the waves that broke gently on the sand. For a moment, she thought she had arrived first, but then she saw two silhouettes near the rocks, Raphael and Ethan, standing across from each other in what looked like a tense conversation. As she approached, she could hear snippets of their argument. "You should have told her from the beginning," Raphael was saying, his voice laced with frustration. "And how exactly would I have explained it? Hello, Aurora, I hired you because you're identical to the woman I loved and who died, and also because your sister was murdered for uncovering my family's secrets." Ethan ran a hand through his hair in an agitated gesture. "There was no easy way to have that conversation." "There was no easy way, so you decided to bring her to the same island where it all happened. Ethan, sometimes you're your own worst enemy." "Maybe I am," Aurora said, announcing her presence. "But I'm here now, and I want answers." Both men turned to her. In the moonlight, Aurora could see the tension on their faces, but also something else: determination. Finally, she was going to get the truth. Raphael approached, carrying a waterproof backpack. "Aurora, before I show you what your sister left, you need to understand something. What's in this bag will change your life forever. Once you know the truth, there's no unknowing it." "There's no going back now," Aurora replied firmly. "My sister died 5 years ago, and I've spent all this time feeling that something didn't make sense. I need to know what really happened." Raphael nodded and sat on a log that had washed up on the beach. He opened the backpack and took out several items: a digital recorder, some photographs, and a sealed envelope. "Your sister was meticulous," he began. "When she realized she was dealing with something dangerous, she started documenting everything. She hid these things in a safe deposit box she rented in New York before coming here for the last time." Ethan sat next to Aurora on the sand. She could feel the warmth radiating from him but didn't move away. Somehow his presence was reassuring, even with all the revelations of the past few days. Raphael turned on the recorder. The voice that came out of it made Aurora feel like she had been punched in the stomach. It was Beatrice, but she sounded scared, urgent. "Raphael, if you're hearing this, something has happened to me. I've found out things about the Lancaster family that are disturbing. Ethan doesn't know anything, I'm sure of it, but his father, August Lancaster, is involved in some very dark things." Aurora felt Ethan tense beside her. Beatrice's voice continued. "Bianca didn't want to marry Ethan. She was being blackmailed. August found out she'd had an affair years ago, before she met Ethan, and he was using it against her. But that wasn't all. Bianca discovered that the Lancaster family company is involved in money laundering, using a network of offshore investments to clean money for drug cartels." Aurora felt sick. "My God." "There's more," the recording went on. "Bianca tried to confront August, said she would tell the authorities everything if he didn't stop blackmailing her. That's when he decided she was a problem that needed to be eliminated." Beatrice's voice grew lower, more frightened. "I was at the house when it happened. I was supposed to be in New York, but I came back because I forgot some documents. I saw August's men take Bianca to the beach. She was alive, Raphael. She was alive and screaming that she didn't want to die." Aurora covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Ethan was as pale as the sand. "They drugged her with something that simulates drowning. Then they threw her body into the sea to make it look like a suicide. August told the men it was necessary to protect the family, that she was a threat that couldn't be controlled." The recording paused for a moment, and when Beatrice spoke again, her voice was broken by sobs. "Raphael, I'm scared. I think August suspects that I know. One of his men showed up at my apartment today, asking questions about where I was last week. I need to get out of New York, but first, I'm going to get evidence. I've photographed documents. I have copies of the bank transfers. It's all in safe deposit box 247 at Santos Bank, Greenwich branch. The key is—" The recording cut off abruptly. Raphael turned off the device. "That's the last recording she made. 2 days later, she died on the highway." Aurora was shaking. She knew she was going to die. She knew she was in danger, but I believe she thought she had more time. Raphael took the photographs out of the bag. This is some of the evidence she managed to get. Financial documents suspicious. Transfers. Names of people involved. Aurora examined the photographs with trembling hands. They were complex documents, but even with her limited financial knowledge, she could see that something was wrong. Huge sums of money being moved between accounts in tax havens, all linked to companies that seemed to exist only on paper. "Ethan," she said, turning to him, "did you know any of this?" The expression on his face was one of genuine horror. "Nothing. I swear on everything I hold sacred, Aurora. I knew my father could be ruthless in business. But this..." He gestured at the photographs. "This is far beyond what I ever imagined." Raphael opened the sealed envelope. "And this is the final proof." Inside was a handwritten confession, signed by a man named Charles Meadows, dated 3 days before Beatrice's death. Aurora read it aloud. "I, Charles Meadows, confess that on the orders of August Lancaster, I administered sedative drugs to Bianca Castello Branco on the night of March 15, 2019, causing her death by simulated drowning. This action was ordered by Mr. Lancaster to prevent Miss Castello Branco from revealing information about the company's illegal financial activities. I make this confession because I can no longer live with the weight of this death on my conscience." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the waves crashing on the shore. Aurora felt as if the world had become surreal, as if she were living in a nightmare. "Where is this Charles now?" she asked. "Died in a car accident 2 weeks after signing this," Raphael answered grimly. "It seems August found out about the confession." Aurora stood up abruptly, walking to the water's edge. She needed air, needed space to process everything. Her sister had been murdered for discovering that Ethan's father was a criminal who had killed Bianca to protect his dirty business. Ethan approached her cautiously. "Aurora, no." She turned to face him, her eyes shining with tears and anger. "Don't come to me with words of comfort. Your family killed my sister. They killed the woman you claim to have loved. How can I believe you didn't know anything?" "Because you know me," Ethan said desperately. "You've worked with me. You've seen who I am. Do you think I'd be capable of staying silent knowing my father was a murderer?" "I don't know what to think anymore," Aurora yelled. "I don't know who to trust. You brought me to the same island where it all happened. You made me feel things for you when you knew there was this terrible connection between our families." "I brought you here because I needed the truth as much as you did," Ethan shouted back. "I spent 5 years blaming myself for Bianca's death, thinking that if I had been a better boyfriend, a better man, she wouldn't have killed herself. When Raphael found where Beatrice had hidden the evidence, I knew I could finally have answers. And you decided to use my feelings to get those answers? No. The feelings are real, Aurora. What I feel for you is the most real thing in my life." Ethan moved closer, his hands reaching for her. "Do you think I faked it all? That I faked the way my heart speeds up when you walk into a room? That I faked the way you make me want to be a better person?" Aurora felt more tears stream down her face. "How can I know what's real? How can I separate your feelings for me from your feelings for Bianca? From your guilt over my sister?" "Because," Ethan said, his voice softening, "when I look at you, I don't see Bianca. I don't see Beatrice. I see Aurora Scott, the woman who works 16 hours a day to care for her sick mother, who never complains, who faces every challenge with a dignity that leaves me speechless. I see the woman who makes me want to be brave enough to face my father and right the wrongs he committed." Raphael approached them. "Aurora, I know this is difficult, but there's something else you need to know." Aurora and Ethan turned to him. "August. Lancaster is in New York right now, trying to find out where we are. He knows the evidence exists. He knows it's a threat to him. If we go back now, without a plan, without protection..." Raphael let the implication hang in the air. "Are you saying we're in danger?" Aurora asked. "I'm saying August has killed 3 people to protect his secrets. I don't think he'll hesitate to kill a few more." Aurora felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you suggesting?" "That we use the evidence to make a deal with the authorities, protection in exchange for testimony." Raphael looked between Aurora and Ethan, But we have to act together. If we split up now, we'll be easy targets." Aurora looked at Ethan, trying to decide if she could trust him. There were so many conflicting emotions in her chest: anger, fear, sadness, but also love. Because that's what it was, she realized with sudden clarity. What she felt for Ethan was love, regardless of all the complications, of all the tragedy that connected their lives. "What do you want to do?" she asked Ethan. "I want to destroy my father," Ethan said with a firmness that surprised her. "I want him to pay for what he did to Bianca, to Beatrice, to Charles. I want justice for your sister, Aurora. And I want the chance to build something new with you, something that isn't built on lies and blood." Aurora studied him for a long moment. In the moonlight, she could see the sincerity in his eyes, the determination on his face, and she made her decision. "Then let's destroy him together." The kiss that followed was different from the last. It wasn't hesitant or questioning. It was the promise of two people who had decided to face the future together, regardless of the dangers that lay ahead. When they broke apart, Raphael was smiling. "There we go. Now we have a chance." But just as he said it, they saw lights approaching from the main beach. Several lights, as if multiple vehicles were arriving on the island. "Shit," Raphael muttered. "He found us." Aurora felt panic rise in her throat. "What do we do now?" Ethan took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "Now we run, and we hope that love is stronger than fear." The lights were approaching quickly, and Aurora knew that the next few minutes would determine whether they would get the chance to expose the truth or become just more victims of the Lancaster family's deadly secrets. But as scared as she was, there was one thing Aurora was sure of. She was no longer alone. Beside Ethan, with the evidence of her sister's innocence finally in her hands, she was ready to fight for the justice Beatrice deserved. And maybe, just maybe, for the future she and Ethan could build together on the other side of this storm. The lights were approaching quickly down the path to the beach. Aurora counted at least 3 vehicles, likely with several men in each. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "This way," Raphael whispered urgently, grabbing the backpack with the evidence. "I know a trail that leads to the caves on the other side of the island. We can hide there until morning." They ran silently through the dense vegetation, Aurora holding Ethan's hand as they navigated the treacherous terrain in the dark. Branches scratched their arms, rocks bruised their feet, but she didn't stop. The adrenaline of fear and determination pushed her forward. Behind them, they could hear voices getting closer, men shouting to each other, the sound of boat engines on the water. August Lancaster had brought a small army to the island. The trail grew steeper as they neared the caves. Aurora was starting to feel exhausted when Raphael finally stopped in front of an opening in the rocks. "In here," he said in a low voice. "The caves connect on the inside. There are multiple exits, so even if they find us, we can escape another way." They squeezed through the narrow opening, using their phones as flashlights. The inside of the cave was larger than Aurora had expected, with a high ceiling and several passages leading in different directions. Raphael led them to a chamber deep inside, where there were signs someone had camped there before, the remains of a fire pit, a few empty cans. "Local fishermen sometimes use this place during storms," Raphael explained. "We should be safe here until morning." Ethan checked his phone. No signal as expected, but I found some energy bars in Raphael's bag. At least we won't starve. Despite the tense situation, Aurora almost smiled. Even in a cave, running from killers, Ethan was concerned about their basic well-being. They sat on the cave floor, leaning against the rock wall. Aurora was between the 2 men, still holding Ethan's hand. In the darkness, she could hear their breathing, the distant sound of the sea, and occasionally voices from outside. "How did August find us so quickly?" Aurora asked quietly. "Probably tracked our phones," Raphael answered. "I should have thought of that." "Or," Ethan said darkly, "he's had someone on the island longer than we thought, someone who was watching us." The implication of those words made Aurora shiver. The idea that they had been watched during their entire stay on the island was terrifying. It doesn't matter how he found us, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. What matters is what we do now. Ethan squeezed her hand. First, we survive the night. In the morning, we try to get to the main pier and take one of the boats. If we can make it to the mainland, we go straight to the FBI, Raphael completed. With the evidence we have, they'll have no choice but to investigate. They fell silent for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Aurora couldn't stop thinking about how her life had completely changed in just a few days. A week ago, her biggest worry was whether her mother was getting the right treatment at the hospital. Now she was hiding in a cave, on the run from the man who had murdered her sister. Aurora, Ethan said softly, there's something I need to tell you. She turned to him in the darkness. What? When all of this is over, when my father is in prison and the truth is out, there's going to be a lot. Kev scrutiny on the company, on me, the media, investigations, scandals. It won't be easy to be by my side. Aurora felt her heart clench. Are you trying to give me an out? I'm trying to be honest about what you'll be facing if you choose to stay with me. Ethan, Aurora said, turning fully to face him, even though she knew he could barely see her in the dark. For the last 5 years, I've lived with a void in my chest because I didn't know what happened to my sister. Now, I finally have answers. And I've found you. Do you think I'm going to back down because of the media? She felt his hands find her face in the darkness, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. I love you, he said simply, and I don't want you to regret choosing to love me back. I love you too, Aurora replied, and as she said the words, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. And we'll face whatever comes, together. The kiss they shared there in the darkness of the cave was different from all the others. It was a promise of a future, a commitment that went beyond the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Raphael cleared his throat discreetly. Sorry to interrupt, but I think we should take shifts sleeping. I can take the first watch. Ethan nodded. Good idea. Aurora, try to get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Aurora nestled against Ethan's shoulder, using his shirt as a pillow. Despite the fear and the discomfort of the situation, she felt strangely at peace. She finally knew the truth about Beatrice. She had finally found someone she truly loved, and tomorrow they would begin the fight for justice. She was, awakened a few hours later by the sound of voices echoing through the caves. They weren't Raphael's or Ethan's voices. They were unfamiliar, and they were getting closer. They're here, Ethan whispered. Raphael went to check the main entrance. I think they found our trail. Aurora sat up quickly, every muscle tense. What do we do? There's a back exit. Raphael showed it to me before he left. It leads straight to the sea, to a small hidden beach. Ethan was already on his feet, helping her up. If we can get there. The voices were getting closer. Aurora could make out at least 3 different men, talking about sweeping all the caves systematically. They moved silently through the passage Raphael had indicated. It was narrower than the main entrance, and Aurora had to crouch in some places. The sound of the sea was getting louder, which meant they were nearing the exit. When they finally emerged onto a small beach surrounded by high rocks, they found Raphael waiting for them in a small inflatable boat. How did you get this? Ethan asked. It was hidden in one of the smaller caves. Fishermen must use it for emergencies. Raphael motioned for them to get in. Come on, we don't have much time. Aurora climbed into the boat, her feet sinking into the soft rubber. It was small, but it seemed sturdy enough for the trip back to the mainland. Ethan was about to get in when lights appeared on top of the rocks above them, voices shouting, men scrambling down the rocks. Go, Ethan yelled, pushing the boat toward the sea. I'll distract them. No, Aurora screamed back. I'm not leaving you. But the boat was already being carried by the current. Raphael starting the small motor and speeding toward the open sea. Aurora looked back and saw Ethan running along the beach, August's men in hot pursuit. We have to go back, she yelled at Raphael. We can't. If we go back now, we all die. Raphael accelerated, the boat bouncing over the waves. Ethan's a good swimmer. He has a chance to escape through the rocks. Aurora felt tears streaming down her face. After finally finding love, after finally having answers, she was losing it all again. But then she heard shouts from the beach. Not shouts of pain, but shouts of surprise. Turning, she saw new lights, appearing, different lights, organized in a military fashion. FBI, Raphael said, relief evident in his voice. I managed to send a message before we went into the caves. It took them longer to get here than I expected. Aurora watched, mesmerized, as helicopters appeared on the horizon, searchlights sweeping the beach. Police boats approached the island from multiple directions. August Lancaster had walked straight into a trap. Ethan, she whispered, searching for him in the chaos of lights and movement on the beach. Then she saw him. He was standing on the rocks, hands raised, but not in surrender, in a signal. To the helicopters, he was safe. An hour later, Aurora was being checked by paramedics on the deck of a Coast Guard vessel. Raphael had immediately handed over all the evidence, and the operation to arrest August Lancaster and his men had been a success. Ethan appeared beside her, a small bandage on his forehead where he had cut himself on the rocks, but otherwise unharmed. Are you okay? He asked, taking her hands. I am now, Aurora replied, pulling him into a desperate hug. It's over, it's really over, he murmured into her hair. My father is under arrest. The evidence is irrefutable. Beatrice and Bianca are going to get justice. Aurora pulled back to look at him. And us? We, Ethan said, smiling for the first time in days, are going to get our future. 6 months later, Aurora stood on the balcony of a new house in Charleston, watching the sun set over the harbor. It was a smaller house than the one on the island. Simpler, but it was theirs. Hers and Ethan's. The trial of August Lancaster had been the scandal of the year. With the evidence Beatrice had collected and the testimony of Raphael, Aurora and Ethan, he had been sentenced to life in prison for 3 murders. The Lancaster group had been completely reorganized under new management, with Ethan donating a large portion of the family fortune to anti-corruption organizations. The process had been difficult, as Ethan had predicted. Months of investigations, media interviews, public scrutiny, but they had faced it together, and their relationship had emerged stronger on the other side. Aurora heard footsteps behind her and felt familiar arms wrap around her waist. What are you thinking about? Ethan asked, resting his chin on her shoulder. About Beatrice. About how happy she would be knowing we did it. She'd be proud of you, of what you did, the courage you showed. Aurora turned in his arms. Of what we did, the courage we both showed. Ethan smiled, that smile that still made her heart race after all these months. I have something for you. He stepped back slightly and took a small box from his pocket. Aurora felt her heart stop. Aurora Scott, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. You saved me from a life of guilt and loneliness. You gave me the courage to face the hardest truths and the hope to build something new. Will you marry me? Aurora looked at the man who had come into her life so unexpectedly and transformed it completely. The man who had chosen justice over family loyalty, love over convenience. Yes, she said, tears of happiness streaming down her face. Yes, I will. The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, as if it had been made just for her, which, Aurora thought, as Ethan kissed her under the orange sunset sky. Perhaps it had been. Maybe some things really were meant to be. I love you. Aurora Lancaster, Ethan murmured against her lips. I love you, Ethan Lancaster, she replied, trying out the sound of her new name. It sounded like home, like a new beginning, like the promise of a future built on truth, love, and the honored memory of a sister who had died seeking justice. The next morning, Aurora visited the cemetery where Beatrice was buried. She knelt before the simple headstone and placed a bouquet of wildflowers. We did it, Bea, she whispered. He paid for what he did to you, and I found someone who truly loves me, who truly knows me. You would have liked him. He has a good heart, like you always said I deserved. The wind blew gently through the cemetery trees, making the flowers dance. Aurora chose to interpret it as her sister's approval. "I'm going to be happy," she promised. "I'm going to live the life you couldn't have. I'm going to love without fear, dream without limits, and always, always remember the brave woman you were." As she stood to leave, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. The pain of her loss was still there, it always would be, but now it was tempered by the certainty that Beatrice had not died in vain, and by the joy of a love that had risen from the ashes of tragedy. Aurora walked back to the car where Ethan was waiting. They had a life to build, a wedding to plan, a future to create together. And for the first time since her sister's death, Aurora was looking forward to what came next. Love had conquered fear, truth had conquered lies, and Aurora Scott, who had once believed she didn't deserve to dream big, was about to marry the man of her dreams in a simple seaside ceremony, surrounded by friends who had become family, and the certainty that sometimes, just sometimes, the darkest stories can have the brightest endings. The island where it all began would always remain in their memories, no longer as a place of tragedy, but as the place where two lost souls found each other and chose to heal together. And when their children were old enough to understand, Aurora and Ethan would tell them about Beatrice, about courage, about how true love is sometimes born from the most unlikely circumstances and grows strongest when tested by adversity. It was the end of a dark chapter, but it was also the beginning of a love story that would last forever.